the topic, which is greenhouse gas emissions in the city of Kalamazoo. And I'd like to introduce Justin Gish, who's going to be our speaker today. He's the sustainability planner for the city of Kalamazoo. He recently accepted this position after working for Southwest Michigan Land Conservancy and the Office for Sustainability at WMU. So, Justin, if you're ready, take it away.
Sure thing. Yep. So, hello, my name is Justin Gish, sustainability planner for the city of Kalamazoo, and hopefully everyone can see my screen there. New position started in May. Here I am, and one of the first charges I got from Jamie McCarthy, my supervisor, was a baseline for both the community, the Kalamazoo community, which is everything, within the city boundaries, and then the city of Kalamazoo, which is the operations. I try to keep those two separate, so it's not as confusing. But when I say the Kalamazoo community, I mean everything within the boundary. And when I say the Kalamazoo city of Kalamazoo, see, I'm doing it already, I'm talking about the municipal operations. So some fun slides. Hopefully it's not too number heavy, but here we go. Maybe. There we go. So, just kind of a quick introduction of what we're going to talk about today. The greenhouse gas emissions for the city and the community. I'm going to talk a little bit about the data, how I came to those numbers, where I got the data from. We'll compare Kalamazoo to other communities and kind of talk about why that can be problematic. Talk about where the data could be improved, where I could do better in future reports, and then some of the city's kind of next steps to decrease these emissions. So we got to talk about jargon a little bit. So I'm going to talk about CO2e, which is carbon dioxide equivalent. It's just a standardization of the three kind of big carbon dioxide or greenhouse gases. So you have carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide. So the CO2e accounts for those three, the levels of those three gases in the atmosphere, and gives you like one kind of digestible number. Talk about metric tons of gases. Metric tons are a little bit different than kind of the standard tons that we're familiar with over here. They're 1,000 kilograms or 2,205 pounds. But when you talk about a gas, like what is a metric ton of a gas? Who knows? It's invisible. So if you think of a telephone pole made up, a cube made up of telephone poles, that's about one metric ton of gas. Another one would be like a basketball the size of a house, if you want to think of something that holds air. I'll talk about municipal solid waste, MSW. That's just the stuff that you and I throw away. That's not construction waste or hazardous waste. It's just the stuff that people tend to use daily. And then we'll talk a little bit about biosolids. That's just the organic matter that's left over after wastewater is treated. And you're going to hear about scopes. So when you're tracking greenhouse gases, you can put some of these emissions into scopes. The scope 1 emissions are those that are directly attributable to the unit under examination. So that's, cars that drive within the city boundaries, gasoline, or a natural gas used in homes, things that are kind of within the boundary, fixed within the boundary. Scope 2 emissions are those relate to the purchase of electricity, steam, heat, or cooling. So here we're talking about electricity generally. When you flip on your light switch, that emission comes from somewhere else, but you're still directly responsible for it. And then scope 3 emissions are those that are a result of activities from assets not owned or controlled by the reporting organization. Landfills are a good example of scope 3 emissions. So the stuff that we use and then throw away and then it decomposes somewhere else, we're still responsible for it, so we can count that as a scope 3 emission. In units, all right, I've done enough of this. I'm getting sick of talking about it. Either, you've got kilowatts, metric cubic feet of natural gas. You can refer to that later. And then, so how did I do this work? So a lot of it's collecting energy use and then inputting it into ClearPath, which is a software provided by ICLEI, which is kind of the international organization that helps folks like me do our work. So they kind of adjust the kilowatts based on the energy, or the, what am I trying to say here? The kind of fuel mixture, energy mixture of consumers. So, they know what type of energy consumers have and where they pull from, how they're making their energy, if it's natural gas, if it's coal, which it isn't, but, and then you put in those values here, and then it spits out the CO2e here. So here you can see, the therms here equal about 0.05 metric tons of CO2e. You can do this at home too. I encourage folks to do this at home. You can kind of figure out your own carbon footprint. at your house by inputting all of the kilowatts and cubic feet of gas you use, and it'll tell you where your own household stands. All right, so that's not as much fun with this picture. Again, you kind of keep in mind, again, I have trouble sometimes where I flip back and forth and I say energy use is high, and I mean emissions, but they're positively correlated. So as you use more energy, you have more emissions. So essentially, I'm saying the right thing, just not in the right way. All right, but that's it. This is what you came here for. So in 2022, which is, I started this in 2023. 2022 was the last year where I had a good whole year's worth of data. The Kalamazoo community emitted 2,053,690 metric tons of CO2e. So that includes energy production, that's the WMU power plant, energy consumption, that's all of our homes and businesses and industry here in the city, transportation, all the cars, everything that moves around in the city, and then solid waste. So that's the community at large, 2 million. So of that 2 million, about 2% is attributable to city operations. So the city is about 50,053 metric tons of CO2e. And there we include energy use in buildings, the vehicle fleet, the streetlights and traffic signals, solid waste, and water and wastewater treatment. So now we'll dive into those community numbers real quick before moving on to the city. But we'll take a step back. So you see those numbers, or you're going to see the numbers I'm going to show you, and they're going to look different than what you're used to seeing kind of nationally, where you have transportation here, about a third or 29%, industry 30%, commercial residential 30%. In my data, these are generally combined because they're getting energy or the same source. It's all consumers' energy. So essentially, you could think of this as 60%, and we don't really have any agriculture in the city limits, or do we? All right, so here's the Kalamazoo community. Scope 1 emissions, remember this is the stuff that's kind of directly attributable, so cars and natural gas. And Scope 2, this is energy use, so about 52% of our emissions come from just electricity use. And then Scope 3 emissions are landfills and the like. All right, so here it is. So remember that national average, or the national pie chart looked different than ours. Here, it's 83% is energy use. And in this energy use, we're including natural gas use and electricity usage. So this is all data that consumers gave me. So it's 83% just energy. So here when we talk about efficiency and decarbonization and solar panels, I think Rick's on this call. He's perking up right now. That's that number there. Energy production, WMU's power plant is 3% of all emissions in the community. Solid waste is 2% of all emissions in the community. And then transportation, all the cars and trains and buses is 12%. So we'll break these categories down here a little bit. For the electricity and natural gas use, consumers gave me all the usage data, it's actual kilowatts, everything that was used, but they gave it to me broken down by zip code. So I had to get a little funky with how I used the data. So I only used energy data from 49007, 49008, and 49001. So excluded are 49006, 49009, which has this, excluded also is 49004, which excludes this neighborhood up here, the Burke Acres area, and then 49048. So as I kind of refine this data and get better about how to kind of suss out energy use in these areas, I can see some of the numbers going up. I expect the residential numbers will go up because there's not a lot of industry in these areas. It's mostly residential. So you can keep that in mind as you look at the numbers. But the core, largest zip codes are well within the city boundaries here. So I'm pretty happy with that. When you break it down by zip code, so here you have 49008 is gray, 07 is orange, and 01 is blue. So you can see where most of the emissions are coming from. It looks like 49007. But if you suss out the numbers a little bit and break it up, you get some more telling signs. So commercial energy, it's kind of clustered in 49007, which is kind of the downtown area there. Commercial gas is high in 49008. And you think, what's going on there? It could be Western. They don't give me any type of connected data. So I don't know what these are. I just know that it was used in those zip codes. But it's also Stadium Drive. Industrial electricity is higher in 49001 than it is in 49007, which was interesting to me because graphic packaging is 49007. So what's going on in 49001? I wanted to get 10 years worth of data so I can kind of see trends and see if, as buildings were put in there, if I could pinpoint when that number jumped, and then maybe I can figure out what's going on there. Industrial gas, that's just WMU's power plant there in 49008. Industrial gas here, that's probably a good chunk, the wastewater treatment plant. More so probably graphic packaging. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And then residential electric, you know, you can see it's high in 49001. And same with residential gas in 49001. Pretty dense neighborhood. So then you look at those neighborhoods a little bit. 49001, population 20,000. 07, population 10,000. 08, population 16,000. So I wanted to try to see, you know, per person, you know, do any neighborhoods stand out? You know, where can we kind of focus some efforts? And here you can see 49001 is a little bit higher than everyone else. But then as I did this work, kind of this average with per person, I was like, oh, do people matter or is it household? So I went in to grab some census data, found the household, and it looks like 49008 comes out on top. So per household, you're using more or emitting more CO2e than the other two zip codes if you're living in 49008. Why is that? Bigger home, you know, that's kind of what I'll spend the next couple of years trying to figure out, but you can see that 49008 is on top. All right, and then transportation. So you can see, kind of no surprise, most of the emissions come from gas vehicles within city. And then you have diesel vehicles pulling in second. Amtrak, you know, steady at 2% and bus at 1%. So I say steady because those will probably never change. This Amtrak is based on a fixed Amtrak schedule. You know, so if we get more people to take Amtrak, less people to take gas vehicles into Chicago, we could see this piece shrink a little bit, and this wouldn't grow because we're just looking, we need passengers. That's gonna be what it is. Same with the bus. If we have more people using the bus in town, we could shrink the gas emissions there. No surprise to any of us, but it's kind of fun to see it on paper. For energy production, so this is all publicly available on the EPA's flight data website. This is Western Michigan University's power plant and the emissions over time. So you can see big dip here, trying to investigate that. I don't know what happened there. And you can see it's trending up too. So it's all publicly available. Graphic packaging is also publicly available, but their numbers are already included in the consumers' numbers that I showed, so they don't get their own call out. But you can look up graphic packaging's emissions too and kind of get a guess at how much they're using. Their facility emitted about 250,000 metric tons, so 250,000 metric tons. But before you start getting after them, we'll kind of figure out what happened there, and maybe it's not all them. Municipal solid waste, 64% of emissions here. You know, it was about, where are we at? 25,000, you know, about 26,000 metric tons just based on the stuff we throw away. And this number is an estimate. I don't have a waste audit for the city, so I used kind of local waste audits and then found the average amount of trash thrown away by an American and then multiplied that by the population of Kalamazoo. And that's how I got that. So that number could be more, it could be less, depending on the kind of disposal habits of folks who live in Kalamazoo. Leaf composting, so all the leaves get picked up in the city are composted within the city limits, so they get their own little call out here in the solid waste section that accounts for 2% of emissions. Combustion, so prior to this year, the city of Kalamazoo would essentially burn or combust all of their arborist debris, so all that giant ice storm that came down, that I think that stuff is chipped now, but prior to, it was combusted. It was a cost-effective way to get rid of a lot of organic woody material, but that's no longer happening. And then biosolids, so this is everything, I guess, I haven't found a good way to say this without being too crass. Everything we flush or send down the drain gets treated, and we have to get rid of those biosolids once everything's kind of cleaned up. So where do we stand? Everyone wants to compare us to Ann Arbor. We're just above Ann Arbor, about 100,000 above Ann Arbor here. They're at 2.04 million. We're at 2.05 million. Well above South Bend. That's the number I want to really dive into. But they get lucky. They don't have to count Notre Dame. Notre Dame's in its own city. And when you do this kind of work, you realize how important how you count and where you live is. Same with Seattle. They're at 3 million metric tons, and that seems very odd. And hopefully the next slide will kind of pull some of that out to figure out why they're at why they're almost close to what we in Ann Arbor are at. Lansing's a little bit lower. Concord, Massachusetts is thrown in there just because there's not a whole lot of data. And then you see the United States down here with hefty chunk of emissions for the world. So when you break down the emissions, and this is all information I gleaned from their greenhouse gas report. So you can see Ann Arbor, energy use is high, transportation is a lot higher than ours, waste is about the same. South Bend, energy use is a lot lower, and that's where it's interesting. I don't know if maybe their mix is different. That's what's happening in Seattle. Their energy use is incredibly low, and it'll probably be higher, I mean, maybe double, but they get a lot of their energy from hydroelectric. So that's not producing any emissions there. So their energy use emissions get to be a lot lower. Lansing, pretty similar to everyone else. So you can see just across the board with our mixture here in the Midwest, just how high our energy usage compared to other localities that have more renewable sources of energy. Basically, it's all natural gas that consumers uses over here, with some solar thrown in. And then we want to compare Ann Arbor kind of on a heads up or a head-to-head. We're a little bit higher in commercial. They're higher in residential. They have more people. It's more of a kind of a bedroom community. But what really stands out is obviously this industrial piece here. So we just have a pretty heavy industrial base here in Kalamazoo. And what I said to kind of hold off on graphic packaging, again, they're 250,000 metric tons of CO2e, which is self-reported on the website. So even if those emissions went away, we'd still be dealing with about 1 million metric tons of CO2e just based on industrial use. And then here's where, Ann Arbor comes out on top, 100%. That's the University of Michigan greenhouse gas footprint there. And then there's Western's power plant. So they are #1 in football and greenhouse gas emissions. All right, so what's next? First thing, you have to let people know where we're at and educate the public about the baseline. And then once we know where we're at, we can kind of come together and figure out a way through this mess. What I want to do, and Mary and I talked a little bit about the new climate corps position that's going to start here. So their whole focus is going to be on the existing housing stock and building stock in the city, trying to figure out what buildings are more or less efficient, how we can work with the Inflation Reduction Act to try to get efficiency, buildings more efficient, get solar panels in there, try to figure out what we can do about the energy use in the city. Because as you can see from this this graph here, this baseline, it's 83% of all emissions are from existing housing stock and commercial energy use. And then the basic things that we all have been preaching forever: increased use of public transportation, investigating community solar options. I know I'll burst some bubbles here. I've been talking to community solar folks. I don't know where it fits within the city. Yeah, I'll say that I have that slide at the end. I won't get ahead of myself. And then looking at city codes and ordinances to eliminate barriers to like personal household solar installations. So we're going to work with SolSmart, which is a national organization that helps to look at the codes and just kind of this whole process around installing solar panels on your house and how we can do that a little bit better. We're also going to work with Solarize. There's a Solarize event that Allie from Green Drinks have been working on. Should come up on February 27th, where we'll get a Solarize event going here in Kalamazoo. So stay tuned for that. It won't be the only event. We'll have more if you can't make the 27th. I've been talking with John Freeman there about getting him here more. All right, so it's not just, you talk about what can individuals do, turning off your lights, your thermostat, all your kind of basic dad stuff. But again, in Kalamazoo, if you look at emissions by sector, industrial, it just stands out there. And then you have residential here, commercial here, and production there. So we really need to work on these industrial emissions. But I guess one kind of silver lining there, you look at the industrial emissions, and it's a lot of electricity. And, electricity can be, solar panels and things like that can help to bring some of that down. So if this was all natural gas, it'd be a lot more, a lot scarier for me is trying to figure out a way through all this and try to plan this. But I was happy to see that electricity there. All right, so that was the community. This is the city. This is the city's operations and emissions there. Again, looking at scope 2, just like in the community, scope 2 is high. We use a lot of electricity. Scope 3 emissions, 27% here because we're responsible for a lot of that waste. And then scope 1 emissions, it's relatively low. How it breaks down, about 59% of emissions are related to water, whether that is bringing you water or taking water away from you. This number or this percentage could be bigger if we included biosolids, but biosolids are included in solid waste, which is 29%. Vehicle fleet for the city is 5%. Streetlights and traffic signals is 5% as well. And then buildings and facilities, that's the energy we use, the gas and the electric, about 12%. So This one's kind of tricky because this is one of those, it's kind of a non-negotiable. We need to provide water to folks. We need to clean water. But the Kalamazoo water treatment plant serves more than just the citizens of Kalamazoo. Water supplies 11 jurisdictions and 196,292 people. In the city of Kalamazoo 2020 census, we're about 73,000 people. So we're taking on the carbon burden for the surrounding communities here. Same with wastewater. It's 200,000 people we provide services to. And we're just, about 73,000 people. So, again, when you're looking at these things, other municipalities can count. Their numbers might look a little bit better. It's because someone else is kind of stuck with the bill. The buck stops here as far as wastewater goes and water supply. Gas and diesel fuel within the city, majority was gasoline use, 66%, 34% was diesel use. We do 437 vehicles here in the city, everything from sedans to snow plows. So again, as we start thinking about how to drop these numbers, there's certain things that we just kind of need. I'm not saying we couldn't do it better, but we're not gonna just get rid of all our diesel, snow plows or things like that. And I know nobody's asking that, but well, I guess some folks occasionally do. So I just want to kind of a little bit of perspective on some of this stuff. So that's where we're at there. For the solid waste, it's biosolids essentially. So right now, all of the biosolids treated in Kalamazoo end up going to a landfill where they sit and they create methane. So that's where that number comes from. Leaf composting, 2%. Again, composting, it's always going to kind of release some CO2. CO2 should be in the atmosphere. Without it, we couldn't live. We're just producing way too much. And then again, the controlled combustion of organic woody debris. That's where we, a little bonfire every year. Traffic signals, the street lights, again, pretty non-negotiable. This one's tricky because there's a relationship with consumers where they maintain and manage these this infrastructure, and then we just kind of pay them for it. So it's part of my job is working with them to figure out ways that we can decrease the emissions related to that and try to find more efficient traffic signals and street lights. Looking at the buildings, you can see the majority, kind of surprisingly, is 55% is natural gas. We'll dive into that number in a little bit, and then 45% is electricity. So 6,182 metric tons of CO2e. So not a whole lot. Again, the city has a fairly small footprint as far as buildings go, and we're including things like the farmers market and the kick pool, which aren't super energy intensive. But there's natural gas kind of standing out there. It's a little bit larger than I'd expect, and this is why. This is the kind of, the boiler here that heats the sidewalks downtown that produced 29,000, almost 30,000 or 29,100 metric cubic. Where are we at? No, that's the metric cubic feet. So it used 29,000 metric cubic feet of natural gas, resulted in 1,547 metric tons of CO2e. So this is just to heat sidewalks downtown. You might have been walking downtown recently and seen steam rising off the top, or maybe you never considered it. But the downtown Kalamazoo heats all their sidewalks, and they use natural gas to do it. The next highest natural gas user is 14,341 metric cubic feet, so about half of what this facility uses to heat sidewalks. And the next highest user is the wastewater treatment plant. So explains that. Looking at other cities, Traverse City here, about 10,000 metric tons. South Bend, kind of right around 42,000 metric tons. East Lansing is, I hope that they put in a comma or a decimal point in the wrong spot, but they're at 502,694 metric tons. And looking at their report briefly, they also do a lot of wastewater treatment, so it's because of that. So what's the city going to do? Again, I said we already stopped burning the woods. That's 167 metric tons gone. We're going to increase the number of electric vehicles in the fleet. So right now we have 0. We're increasing that to 2 this year for sure, and there'll be more to come. Facilities is all in on electric vehicles. But again, I won't say it's a problem, but we got to think about how that's going to change the usage. Electric vehicles are more efficient, almost, I won't say, they're more efficient. I won't give a number. I've been playing with those numbers. So they result in less CO2e in the atmosphere. But But as we, switch to electric vehicles, we're going to see those pieces of pie not necessarily shrink, but just kind of change. So the gas use will go down, but the electric use will go up. We have switched to biodiesel, and it looks like kind of best estimates now, if the usage stays the same, we'll shave off 100 metric tons of CO2e just by switching to biodiesel there. We're going to investigate sustainable biosolids disposal. So remember the biosolids piece, that material gets shipped to Zealand where it goes in a landfill. It's a little bit more intense than that. So it's not that material leaves the facility. 253 wet tons of that material leaves the wastewater treatment plant every day, and that takes 6 gravel trains. So 6 diesel semi trucks hauling 2 kind of those large dumpsters you see, or large beds. 6 of those leave the treatment plant a day and head over to Zealand. So if we were able to treat that in-house, decrease the tonnage there. So if it wasn't 253 wet tons, maybe it was a ton of, a dry ton, we could decrease emissions that way. We're going to work on refining the idling policy for the city vehicles. Some vehicles have to idle, but not all do. Try to cut down on the gasoline use until we can get our electric fleet up there. Work with the employees on energy efficient behaviors. Again, it's just 12%, but working on, folks in offices to understand the importance of collective action around lights and temperatures and things like that. And then using kind of these federal grants that are out there to identify buildings for energy efficiency upgrades and solar panels. So again, it's the built environment, trying to find ways to make it more efficient, use less energy, and produce our own renewable energy. All right, so if we all pull together as a team, here's the 3 institutions that I could find here in Kalamazoo with kind of numbers that I could play with and goal of net zero. Zoetis is in there. They pledged net zero by 2030, but I don't have any of their usage numbers, so they weren't included here, but they're leading the charge here. Kalamazoo College and the City of Kalamazoo, net zero by 2050, and then Western here, 2065. So, next year we'll check on these numbers and see where we're all doing. Hopefully Kalamazoo College can get there soon. They're the closest. So again, as we go up, we go down. These numbers will go up as new categories are included. Airplane emissions aren't included in this report because I just couldn't get those numbers, but I'm going to include those in future baselines. Freight trains weren't included as well because I don't have a set schedule I could play with. I got to work with the railroads, which will be a treat, I hear, to figure out how many diesel engines and trains are going through Kalamazoo a day, and I can kind of figure out how they're doing there. I included a more residential data, so I want to figure out a way to get those zip codes that were included in the data, get a better picture there. And then employee commute data I want to include in future city baselines. So where are all the employees of Kalamazoo going, and how does their commute impact kind of the city emissions? But they could also go down, national estimates were used for solid waste. So Kalamazoo folks could throw out less waste and do more composting and be a little bit better about what they throw away, so that solid waste, that municipal solid waste emissions number could shrink a little bit. And then I want to see the changes made by the city, reflecting in these new reports. So I'm already working on the 2023 report now. I asked for the consumers data, and then hopefully I'll get that shortly. The city data will come out every year, and then the community data maybe 3 or 4 years, because some of that data just needs time to build up and be publicly available. But every year I will have a city baseline, or not a baseline at that point, a city greenhouse gas report. And then working with folks, getting that Inflation Reduction Act out there, helping folks trying to figure out how to decarbonize and become more energy efficient. Working with industry, you saw that big chunk there of emissions from industry, trying to reach those folks and help them try to, see the value in adding solar panels, being more energy efficient. And then working on carbon sequestration and calculations. So right now, there's no, kind of reuptake of carbon by trees. That data's there. It's a little tricky. The best I could find is, an average tree is like 48 pounds of CO2 a year. And so far, everything I've been working on is metric tons. So other reports, you don't see a huge dip, but I'd still like to include it just to be as accurate as possible. And then here's some homework, because I know that I've talked to some of you all about community solar, and I've been really trying to dive into that. And not to say that there's no place for it, but I don't know how it fits into the city exactly. And I'll talk about some of the conversations I had with the community solar lobby too. So just based on those 3 zip codes and the energy data that I was given to, that consumers gave me, you're looking at 1.8 billion kilowatt hours in those 3 zip codes for residents, residents, commercial, and industrial. convert that to megawatts, you're at 1.8 million megawatts. New community solar regulations would allow for production of 5 megawatts. And if you think of Western Solar Garden there, to kind of get your head around some of this scale, it's 8.5 acres large and it produces 1 megawatt of power. And then a 5 megawatt system would be 30 to 40 acres. So again, and this is my friend Taylor, who will be working on this probably better at the county level. You know, there's not 30 to 40 acres for a 5 megawatt system within the city. But that's not to say that you, as a resident of the city, can't buy into a community solar project in, say, Lawton or Matawan. And that's kind of the model that they've described to me. It's really a subscription service where, you know, they to kind of break the monopoly or kind of the stranglehold that consumers has on the energy grid, allow these other businesses to come in, hook up to the grid. And initially I was told it was only transmission lines, but I've been assured that you can hook these community solar installations up to distribution lines, which makes things a lot easier. But you as a citizen could buy into this solar and kind of invest that way. But again, yeah, I mean, you don't really have to solve it. It's big. You know, how many acres would we need to meet the electrical demands of just those 3 zip codes? More than I can. You know, I can't shut down a golf course and solve that. That was the biggest piece of land I was looking at here in Kalamazoo that the city owns. You know, it's a golf course or a forest. I guess I could put a forest. I'm being glib. This doesn't help me in these recorded sessions or when I'm not in person, but throwing those out there. So again, if you have any questions, you can reach me at that email there. I also encourage you as citizens to go speak to the Kalamazoo Environmental Concerns Committee. They meet every 3rd Wednesday. You can email them at that address. We can talk there, kind of get that more out in the open, any of your concerns or ideas, and figure out a way through this. And then with that, hopefully I ran through it quick enough that we could have lots of questions and discussion.
Well, the first question is in the chat. And it's, who is the contact, whoops, I lost that, working on existing buildings in Kalamazoo?
Yeah, no one. I mean, that's not something that we track. I was trying to pull solar panel data, and like we don't have a box that, you know, kind of segregate solar building permits or electrical permits or anything like that. So again, yeah, part of my job too is just wrapping your head around, yeah, where's this information at? How do we get better at storing it? And that's what my Climate Corp person is going to work on, is trying to figure out what, you know, just what the efficiency picture is here in Kalamazoo. Then in the city, we have a facilities manager who oversees, you know, all facilities, and that would probably be tied up into their. No, this was just a conversation that I had with Marianne about bringing on the My Healthy Climate Core person to do that energy efficiency work with me. So this is a yet to be filled position that's similar to AmeriCorps that the city received. And then that individual who works in that position will be working on energy efficiency program.
So it was 2 questions. How efficient is the waste recycling? And can we encourage companies to have buses?
Yeah, recycling, I think we're pretty good. That would be a Chris Broadbent question. Recycling wasn't included in my data there. But again, this is where we'd need like a proper citywide specific to Kalamazoo waste audit, because then we can see what people are actually throwing away. Right now, I'm just dealing an estimate. So it could be that, yeah, nationally it's 4.9 pounds of waste per person per day. Maybe Kalamazoo does a lot better because we recycle more, and it's not 4.9 pounds, say it's 3 pounds, and then that would change my numbers a little bit. So I guess I hate to give this answer, but I don't know. And then company-wide buses, I would ask why company buses and not buses that are already running. If we're doing company buses in addition to the public transportation, then we're going to see an increase in the bus number, because now we'll have 2 buses going instead of 1. So I would just encourage folks to try to use the buses that are already running. But yeah, that's just kind of my thoughts on that one.
Okay, Tim, you had a question?
Justin, maybe you can't really comment on this, but can you give any sense of how much support there is in the city amongst city employees and so on? Are they cooperating with you readily, or grumbling about having to engage in some of this work?
No, not at all. Very pleasantly surprised. I won't even say roadblocks I get. Any questions I get are very practical questions, and they're not meant to trip me up at all. It's like, we got to figure out a way to do this. And a lot of this work has happened. I mentioned it. I don't want anyone to think that it was a lot of my doing. I've been here 8 months. So the biosolids was led by facilities. The electric vehicles is being led by facilities. So yeah, I think we have great support here. Very pleasantly surprised.
Susan?
Okay, thank you. Yes, and thank you, Justin. Two questions. First, there are benchmarks for buildings these days that various organizations put out. Chicago recently required their large buildings to report their energy use corresponding to the benchmark to see how far they had to go to meet it. Is there any effort in Kalamazoo or perhaps in Michigan more broadly to do that? And second, it sounds like we're not using a consumption-based inventory. This would actually help us given all of the wastewater services we provide for the other areas in the county. And is there any discussion of moving to that approach to greenhouse gas inventories? Thank you.
Yeah, the building piece, and everyone's gonna look to Ann Arbor, and they have they have pretty strict building standards. That's not going to come from me as the sustainability planner. That's going to come from city council and citizens encouraging elected officials if that's something that they want. So a lot of me will be punting that way. And that's, again, this is something that could be discussed at the Environmental Concerns Committee to kind of get that out in the open. Yeah. And then the consumption piece, yeah, that's a facilities question. I'm not sure. It's just, it's easier for me to just, pull the kilowatts and the cubic feet and do it that way. But it's tricky. Anytime you mention, well, you might have seen, if anything that's going to drive rates up for different communities, it's very political. Mine, luckily, it's kind of abstract. I can pull myself out of it. But again, and this goes for any type of things that you want to see in the city, I absolutely encourage folks to reach out, to their elected officials and the concerns committee to kind of get some of this stuff out there.
Catherine is asking, is this data published anywhere? Is your report online somewhere?
It will be. It's getting formatted right now. So it kind of looks like other cities. Yeah, you don't want to look at the stuff that I've got on my desktop right now. It's going to be a little bit more digestible and a little bit more visually appealing, I guess. So yes, it will be. It'll be posted online. I'm sure there'll be another social media push on it, but it'll be on the Imagine Kalamazoo website with the community.
Do you have any idea when that might be?
Nope.
Okay.
So I'll make another push. You'll know. I guess it won't be hidden.
Yeah, since you're talking to the community is asking that if they can see it,
Yep. I am not a graphic designer, so it'll be out there. Yeah, I'm not gonna hide. I will say too, as I like to pick on them a little bit, Ann Arbor doesn't publish their citywide data. So I know everyone likes to look to them, but we are publishing our municipal operations data. Theirs is private. So give us a gold star. I need all the gold stars I can get.
Are they? Well, the city is included, isn't it, in what they publish? It's just not separated out.
Yeah, and so is ours. Ours is included in the community, but we're giving a specific what the city's doing there.
And then Rick is asking, do you know what type model of EVs Kalamazoo is planning on adding? You said they're adding 2, and my add-on to that is what department?
That's facilities owns all vehicles. I believe it's 2 pickups now, and they're looking at a couple of public safety cruisers as well, and then some sedans. So, okay,
so you are looking at getting some police vehicles?
That's what I've heard at the last meeting. Yes.
This one is from Anne. My daughter and husband live in Vine. They put up solar panels that produce more energy than they use, but they don't realize much in their electric bill. What can be done with consumer energy to provide better incentives to encourage more solar panels?
Yeah. Again, I might defer on this one or punt. Maybe in private I have a different answer. But I don't think, Michigan's kind of funky the way I understand it. There's no buyback program. You get credit. I don't know if consumers believe there's a cap of 1% about how many solar panels you can put on. Rick will probably jump all over me here. But I don't know if there is an incentive or any interest in consumers to help in this way. But good for them for producing more energy than they use. I'm still planning on it, and I guess I brought this up in the green drinks, and I can bring it up now. One of the highest energy use buildings is Crosstown Parkway building, where the police, public services, or public safety, and the courts buildings are. And the planning division, we're going to move in there soon in 2025, I believe. So I'm looking to put solar panels on that roof there, and it's a flat roof. There's no trees around. Thinking, all right, this is fantastic. I got a quote. The roof's gigantic. It's 9,000 square feet. It's flat. You can angle the panels whichever way you want. I talked to a local solar provider, and they gave us a quote. What putting solar panels on that building would do, and it would decrease our emission or decrease our energy usage by 14%. And that was just really kind of my aha or kind of wake up moment. I had to tell my kid there's no Santa Claus. It's probably equivalent how he felt when I told him that, when the solar company told me that I would only cut emissions for usage by 14%. So great for decreasing that. But it just goes to show it's not just solar panels. It's also energy efficiency. It's also usage. I digress. But yeah, so I don't know. I would check with consumers and, again, elected officials, Public Utilities Committee, folks like that. Yeah, 14%. Yeah, it's definitely a help. But I wanted 50. I wanted something bigger, but I was a fool. So.
And was that the maximum number of solar panels you could put on the roof?
Yep, maxed it out. And that's not even going through any type of engineering to see if the roof could even hold that many solar panels. This was, kind of a satellite view and looking at space and stuff like that. So, but again, yeah, it's the big three. It's people, it's efficiency, and it's renewable energy.
Okay. From Rick on cars again, do you know how many EV charging stations are now installed on municipal property?
Yeah, 0. We're getting them though. There's going to be some at public services. There's going to be some at public services and public safety. Right now, they're on their way.
What about the parks where people are parking? I don't know. I think they're municipal, like Millam Park. Yeah, people park there for hours as they're going and playing in the park. Are you planning on putting any charging stations where people will be? That's municipal.
Yeah, not to my understanding, not currently. Problem with that, so it's municipal property, but the city I don't know what the interest is in creating a new public utility, which would be the charging station. So if a company came along and wanted to work with us to put in charging stations in public property, that might be more interesting than the city owning and operating charging stations for the public's use.
Well, have you talked to Oshtemo? They've put in a couple of charging stations by their parks. I'd work with, I don't know if it's ChargePoint or some other company. And so if you're going to the park, you're going to be watching your kid play soccer, you can charge your car. It's not free. You have to, there's charge to it. So it's and people use it. So I think, the property is available. I think maybe this is something you can be looking into.
Yeah, no, that's great. I appreciate the tip. I wrote it down.
Okay.
Today.
From Susan, have Kazoo streetlights all been switched to LEDs?
Not all, maybe all, but again, here's where we have to figure out what LEDs we want, because I'm also, in conjunction with this, I deal with everything here. I'll be getting an email about deer, I'm sure soon, but also working on dark sky kind of zonings and things like that. And we got to be careful what LEDs we put in. We got to make sure that they're soft light and things like that. I guess I'm just digressing, but we're getting there. I don't think it's all LED yet, but I also have to make sure that it's the right LED for birds. And I don't know if Gail's on this call, for birds and bees and other insects.
Also, you were talking about traffic lights at the same time you were talking about lights. Can traffic lights be LED? I have not a clue. That's a legitimate question. I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's great. And those are only lumped in together because that's how it is in my software. You could break them out a little bit, but yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
Rick is saying that the legislation raised the solar cap to 10%, but actually it was 10% and they've raised it.
Okay.
And Mary Ann says every 14% is a help.
Yeah, no, and that's how I need to think of things. I can't, just think I'm going to correct everything in one fell swoop by putting solar panels on a building. But 14, yeah, it still was sad.
Yeah,
But
you put in 14%, and then you put in some efficiencies, and that 14% might become a lot
25.
more.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Yeah, it can't just be not one solution. And then, yeah, the savings there, parlay that into other services and more panels. And get ahead of the rooftop thing real quick. So when I talk to these folks, like, they're scared of these disparate parcels that aren't connected, and who owns the rooftop. So I kind of use this example. You have one farmer with a field and there's 100 acres. That's one lease. That's one piece of equipment that has to hook up the distribution line. If you have 50 rooftops, that's 50 owners, 50 leases, 50 different types of machines or infrastructure that has to hook up the distribution line. Not saying it can't be done, but yeah, I just want folks. Yeah, if I can't get my 14% and be happy about that, you can't get your rooftop. So bring everyone down a bit.
Jeff, your question?
Yeah, thanks, Nikki. Hi, Justin. Great presentation. I just want to put in a plug as the city is implementing and seeking outside grant money. Remember, I'm sure you do, but like the county's getting there too. Western's going through a new cycle of climate action planning, which will lead to implementation. I'm already trying to think about pulling in outside funding too. K College's plan is new. I know they're in the implementation phase. So the more we can, when we see an issue where we can all write the same kind of support letter for each other, let's do that. Like if we can help adjust K Metro's work and make the busing system better and more efficient, let's do that, right? Or if we can all draw together maybe the first big community solar installation, let's try to do that. Or maybe it's something on a landfill or similar, large scale multi-jurisdiction, including the higher ed institutions. I don't know exactly what to do first, but I'm ready to jump together if we can. So thanks for your work.
Yep.
I have another question. This one's from Elise, and it sounds like solar will help, but what other prospects for other renewable sources for electricity generation?
Yeah, I mean, this is pretty geographically dependent. We're not going to have hydro. Wind, probably not down here. So again, it goes back to solar and it goes back to efficiency. I mean, if we get more efficient about buildings and energy use, I think that's the best we can do here. No one wants to, I'm not opening up a nuclear plant, but that's emissions free. Other issues, but there's no CO2 with nuclear. So yeah, I don't know. That's the question. Geothermal, could help a little bit. We might just have to get creative in kind of our area. But again, you look at Seattle and what kind of diversifying your energy sources looks like there, and yeah, it's pretty impressive. So too bad we don't live next to some raging rivers or rapids.
Justin, I have another question for you because sometimes you say this isn't my bailiwick. So what is your bailiwick? You reported on this sustainability, but you seem to be implying that, looking for solar panel the spaces isn't, getting cars isn't. So what's your responsibility versus other people's responsibility for pushing the sustainability?
Oh yeah, I guess I'm the mover here now. So facilities was moving in that direction. And that was probably as a result of the community sustainability plan, but now it's my job to oversee that plan and make sure that it comes through. So I'm constantly tracking down grants. I'm working with neighborhood groups on how to become more efficient. So it's a little bit of everything. Like I don't necessarily make the decisions, but I encourage others to make the decisions and assist wherever possible. So right now I am working on those grants. I think someone let the cat out of the bag. It doesn't matter. We're applying for grants for streets, and so as we work on these kind of large federal grants, and there's some going to streets, I kind of insert myself and say, all right, we can also maybe look for some type of solar, which fits in with the grants as far as decreasing pollution and making more resilient cities. So I'm kind of injecting sustainability throughout. So while I'm not a director level or make these decisions, I'm involved in these decisions and give input. So recently, I sat in on the tree plan, and I gave input there to kind of pull some invasive species off the tree plan. I'm working on urban deer surveys and grants and things like that. So basically, yeah, everyone might have been doing some of this work, but now I'm kind of the hub that kind of makes sure that this work gets done. I help the grant folks, so when they do need this type of data, I'm able to provide them data and kind of give them real estimates of how our grant work could decrease emissions and things like that. So yes, maybe I didn't give myself enough credit. Yeah, I'm in there, I'm in the trenches, but I'm a grunt.
I was just sort of curious, so like if let's say facilities, the police department, because that's something I've been looking at for the township. So if the police department or your safety comes to you and says, we're interested in getting vehicles, then would it be your position that you go out and look at the vehicles and determine what's feasible and come back with recommendations for them?
Facilities, yes, with facilities.
Okay.
Yeah, so this recent, the biosolids decision, I was a part of that. So I helped give input on what type of system we should look at. And I provided data on the CO2 emissions of each system and things like that. So really, if someone has a problem that they don't want to or can't solve around sustainability, then it comes to me.
Okay, thank you. I just needed some clarification there. I was getting confused.
Yeah. Yep. Oh, I am too. I mean, this is a position that's been open or only available since May, so we're still figuring things out. But I have great relationships with all the facilities folks, as far as I can tell.
Okay. Well, thank you. I would say thank you for being here.